to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Jody Lynn, I was just kind of meditating on an interesting thought as we were listening to the intro there, because before we got started here, you were telling me that you and Nate had celebrated an anniversary, and there's a whole thing there with the date and how it has played out serendipitously over and over again. By the way, happy anniversary. But that was pretty cool. And it occurred to me that we have a couple serendipities going on, because you just had a really, really great one going on there, which, just when you were telling me the story, I was like, wow, okay, that's really cool. But we have another one in that this is your daily dose of happy. And the person we have joining us today is all about happiness. She's actually a happiness guru. I didn't even know happiness gurus existed, but there is one apparently, because she's joining us on the show. Her name is Dashama Gordon. And Dashama, thank you so much for joining us today. I have to ask you a question though, because I was reading your bio on your website, and your story, God, it's just so reminiscent of the stories that we've had from so many people who end up in a very happy or joyful place, because you've been through all different kinds of hell. It's almost like you go through the hell in order to appreciate the happiness, or something along that line. But I'm not going to ruin the story. Well, actually, I guess I just did ruin the story by giving the tag there. But I'm not going to ruin it any further. I'm going to let you tell the story. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us in the program. How you doing?
Thank you. So happy to be here. I'm doing
So
great.
tell us the story of how you got to be this happiness guru.
It's a really interesting. I guess you did kind of give a little bit of a prelude. I really do believe that you can only go as high as you've been low. So I do think that might be why so many people who become renowned in the happiness field went through something very difficult in order to get there. And I feel like part of that is because when you go really, really low, there's really only two options. It's like end it or, find your way back up. And like in that finding your way out of the darkness, it's a beautiful journey, because you really do realize like all these important wisdom points of life, and it's universal wisdom. It's wisdom that everybody needs to understand about life. And, I have so many friends that are like billionaires, or, they have everything that you could ever want, like on paper, but they were maybe depressed or overweight, or didn't have their health in order. Different things were going wrong in their relationships and stuff. And I just realized everybody goes through challenges, and it's our kind of universal connectivity that we all have in common, which is we go through challenges and then we have to find our way back to the light. And so to be a happiness expert or guru, as you said, it's really more that I've learned through the darkest points how to find the way back to that light. And always now, after this long, that I can find my way back. And then also I can help people find it too. So I guess that's what a teacher is anyway, is somebody that shows you a way. And I wasn't really, I didn't intend to start out, I wasn't like, I'm going to be a happiness expert, but I think because when I was 7 years old, my mother lost her mind. She became schizophrenic, and it was from drug and alcohol addiction. It triggered some chemical shift in her brain when I was 7. So my sisters and I ended up split up, and we were put into foster homes, raised by strangers. And then we moved around a lot. So it wasn't even like in one foster home. It was just like lots of different homes. So there was so many things, and it was a lot of trauma, because when you lose your family, and especially my mother and I, we had a really strong bond, and she just never got her mind back. I mean, my whole life I suffered from that because I wanted to help her. And if you ever knew anybody with really severe mental health, I mean, there's different levels of mental health. I became part of the happiness expert is really like a mental health healer, and somebody who's really dove deep into that journey. I understand from age 7 the power and the importance of your mind, your mental health, and your physical health, and then how it's all interrelated, how your physical health is a reflection of your mental, your emotional, even your spiritual energy is speaking to us through all of this. And that's really how this all began for me. Was it started at age 7. It never stopped. But in my early 20s, right after college, is when I took it on as a career.
Yeah. With a lot of themes in there we can touch on. I don't know where we want to just. I mean, Jody, you've been through your own stuff too. Which one grabs your attention first?
Oh, I think all of it. I really relate to you, Dasha, with the mental health. I experienced that with my mom actually when I was a kid, and that was the building block for personal development for me and understanding myself. But I love how you wrapped that to the mental health, the emotional health, the physical health, and your vibration and how it's all tying together. That's totally my jam.
Yes. That's one thing that I found so much. I felt like a home with the spiritual community when I finally chose like this path as a career and a dharma, was that, wow, there's other people like me, like I had always been out there. I thought I was just like, an alien or something my whole life. And then finally, when I found the spiritual community, I was like, there's other people like this. Like, and it felt I wasn't so alone. Even though I think a lot of times on the healing journey or on your spiritual journey, or even as a teacher, a leader, different things, entrepreneur, there's so many different things that make you kind of at times feel alone, even when you're around people. But ultimately, to know that there are other people that have been through something similar, it starts to create this deep connectivity where, for me anyway, and especially when I was a child, when I was living in all these strangers' homes, that there was this feeling of we are all family. And that is our commonality, the human condition, the human family. Everybody has their different storyline, but we've all been through something. And those of us who have been through something similar, I feel like so often we feel like this like camaraderie, like, okay, we've done it, we've made it through, or like we're making it through at least at this point.
Well, the making it through is a big deal. I have to ask you a question, and this is a fairly serious one. You were thrust into the foster home network. Were you ever adopted, or did you go through your entire childhood in foster care?
Well, it was interesting. I was never adopted, but what happened was I got a really interesting exploration, of these different homes, the different situations. Some of them did it for different reasons, like people in that kind of like category. A lot of times they were doing it for the extra money. So, you got these like really, and then there was like a few that were doing it for like just they were like compassionate. But one thing that was the big blessing that happened for me when I was 12, after 5 years of that, it was very interesting what happened actually. My father and my mother, although they were addicted to drugs and alcohol, they kept trying to get us back. And it was an interesting function of the system where your parents can get you back if they prove that they're like fit enough to take care of you. So they would like go through these stages where they would be like, they would have a job or something, and then all of a sudden they could like get us back. So we would go back, and then they would do something totally stupid and get us taken away again. So like my mother like got arrested at school for yelling at the principal. Now there was reasons, because my sister had her nose broken by a bully at school. So my mom came to school and was drunk and pissed, and she yelled at the principal, like, how could you let this happen? And what they do? Arrested my mom instead of the bully who broke my sister's nose. But anyway, like the whole system is kind of more or less broken. But anyway, there was these moments where we would go back with our parents, and then it would be very dysfunctional, and we would come back into the foster care system, and it was back and forth for like 5 years. And then I was very traumatized from that. I had this like deep loss, and it was like I cried almost every night. I didn't get to sort of have deep bonds with other kids that much because I always knew I was going to be leaving soon. So it was this like feeling of like, don't get too connected. But I was very friendly, and I made really, it was really good I made friends easily, but I never got to keep them. But anyway, so then when I was around 12, it was a time when we were living with my father again. And then he didn't have a job at the time, and it was pretty bad. He was addicted to crack. It was a really weird thing. I don't know how they gave us back to him. But anyway, we were living with him, and we were like, we're going to go stay with our aunt in South Dakota. That was my mother's adopted sister. And she invited us to come for a few weeks. So we're like, we're going to go stay with her. When we get back, we want to see you have a job and get your life together. And so we left, and we stayed with my aunt in South Dakota for a few weeks. And then, it was really nice because she's like so compassionate. It was interesting. My mother and my aunt were both adopted. Neither of them were biological, but like they were so different. And so my aunt, she always her whole life, even from a childhood, her dream was to have an orphanage. And it was so interesting because she kind of ended up manifesting that, because she had a child of her own, and then she married a guy that had 2 children, and she adopted a child. So she had 4 children when we went there. And then we told her what was going on with our dad and the foster homes and everything, and she was very compassionate about it. She didn't have the capacity to take 4 children additionally into her home, but what happened was we left and we went back to my dad's place after this 1 month with her, and then he didn't get a job. And in fact, it was worse. Like, he sold our stuff, like he stole our money. Like, I had a total of $500 saved in my life savings account that I had from birthdays, and he took the money and bought crack with it. It was just like the worst case scenario. We were so pissed. So like when I was 12, we divorced my dad. Basically, we were like, we're out of here. We left, and we called our family, my aunt, and we were like, we can't go back there. And so, it was a big decision at a young age. Like, we're divorcing him, we're leaving him, kind of thing. And then my aunt in South Dakota, the one that wanted an orphanage, she was able to take 2 of us, and then the other 2 went with other family members. And so after age 12 to 18, I was kind of in this other type of orphanage, but it was like somebody that was a relative in that way. And she let us live with her through high school. And so it was like a huge blessing, even though it was kind of the same to me, because she was kind of like a foster mom, like she wasn't my real mom. She wasn't even biologically related. And there was like 4 other children in addition, so it was a little bit like an orphanage, but it was a tiny bit closer to family because
well, that's all it takes. I mean, you probably know as well as I do that the statistics for people who go through the foster care system are never adopted and they come out the other end. I mean, the statistics are horrible in terms of their likelihood of succeeding or even being alive. I think it's like 95% are either dead or in prison by 25. I mean, it's just really horrible statistics. So you really did hit the jackpot when your non-related aunt came through for you that way. That was a big deal. That was really a big deal.
I think about her all the time. Like, she taught me so many things. I'll tell you one thing. She gave me the best, even to this day, I still think it's the best book I was ever gifted. And I've been gifted some really good books, but she gave me this book when I was, I think, 13. And it's called, you could look this up. It's still out there. It's an old book. It's called How to Be Like Women of Influence. And it's the 20 greatest women of the 20th century. And it had like Mother Teresa, had Oprah in there. Even Oprah was in there like 40 years ago. Like, she was already like with Mother Teresa. She was big already when I was like 12. But anyway, so she, and then there was like Amelia Earhart. Each woman in the book represented a quality of, an embodiment of a quality that you would aspire towards. And me growing up with like no good role models, like really just like traumatized and not having any clue. It was a huge gift, because when I read about specifically Oprah, she was one of the biggest ones. And then the other one, Mother Teresa, I think was also very, very impactful. Just like the story, like I think Mother Teresa was compassion, like that was her word. And so each of them was given a word, a quality, and kind of a description of why they embodied that quality, what aspect of their choice making had led to that. And when I read, it was like 20 different women. And I just remember how impactful that was, because it was my first glimpse into being like, I can be like that. Wow, I'm going to aspire to be a great woman. Not necessarily like woman of influence, but like a woman that embodies these qualities, And I just, it changed my life, that book. I mean, I had a lot of really good books, but like that one, I just remember it was like, I think the best gift she ever gave me, other than the fact that she embodied this like patience and compassion, and she never raised her voice at me, even though I was like kind of a rebel and a bad, problem child, but like when you're all traumatized and everything, a lot of kids do end up like that. And I was going through that.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. I'm glad that you did get that book, because clearly it made a huge impact on you, and it was the right kind of impact just when you needed it. So perfect timing. Wow. Really, really cool.
That's one of those things, you look back on your life and you realize, like, every time when you remember, you like see those little moments, you go, that's God right there. You know what I mean? It just brings you closer to that like the knowing instead of like, I wonder or something. It's like, there's no chance these things are just happening on like coincidentally, you know.
Well, you certainly had enough to deal with. I mean, not just the part that you've already told us about, but I mean, I was scanning your bio. You were in a very highly traumatic auto accident. You had some serious damage from that. You went through hyperthyroidism. I mean, my ex-wife went through that. I know what that's like. That's not fun at all. I mean, you had a number of things that have happened, and I'm sure they've all fed into the person you've become and the attitude that you've adopted about how important happiness is and how you want to help other people be inspired to it and so forth. Each one of those, in a sense, I'm sure had their own inflection points, like you were talking about. But nevertheless, you go through those things, and they are traumatic and they are scarring and they're challenging. When you go through those things and you come out the other side, it's an amazing thing. But when you're going through it directly, it's like a continuation of that trauma. You had trauma from an early age, and you're continuing one trauma after another. So I guess my question at that point, after detailing all of that, is how did you get away from the trauma in your mind?
Well, you know what's so interesting? There was two things that really saved me, I would say. One of them was my enthusiasm, I would say, for growth, right? So it's like, even as a younger person, I would see things like happening in my life, and I would be like, okay, I'm going to channel this energy into something good. So, for example, I got really good in school, and I would get all A's. I would win all the awards, and I was in all the sports, and I would do all these sports, and I would just take all this energy that I had that I didn't know what to do with it, and I would put it into something that would allow me to focus the energy, whether we can call it trauma, but it's actually, now as I work with a lot of people with trauma and also through my own traumas, I do still call it trauma. But I want to use, the other day I had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about the positioning of and using the word energy a little bit instead of trauma, because trauma is it's a form of energy. And when I feel into it, when I reflect on it, and like I had flashbacks about certain moments in my life that were so traumatic that my mind would go into a loop and relive it. And it felt not like that I had that happen one time, but that it could have happened a million times to me in this life, that it happened so often in my mind. It wasn't just the mind, my full body, because I'm an empath and I could feel everything, that I could feel it over and over. And it was like almost like I had relived it a million times in this body, these specific trauma moments. And so, but when I would catch myself, now that's when I fell in love with meditation, because I realized I could be the observer of that. And I was like, wow, I'm doing it again. Because I knew every time I did that, it brought me into a spiral down into a very bad place. And I was like, okay, how do I stop myself from going into this downward spiral? And then I saw it through the meditation practice. I was able to finally be the witness of that. And then I was like, okay, how do I stop this before the spiral gets bad? But then also working with the idea that it's okay to go into it if you create space for that. But if you have the tools to handle it when you're going into it, not to just go into it and wallow in that terrible place, but to go into it with love and compassion, to wrap that whole experience in a new energy. So if I think about it, for example, I'll tell you one of the traumas that I relived my whole life. And it was actually only just the last couple of years where I really fully let it go. And before that, I would just cry just thinking of it, and my whole life. And it was a moment, I remember when my mother lost her mind. I was there that night, and I was 7, and I remember. And anyway, so she lost her mind, and a lot of things were connected to that. Like, for example, when she lost her mind, actually developed a story that her husband was an imposter. So our dad all of a sudden was like an imposter sent by the government to whatever, spy on us. I don't know. She had the paranoid side of schizophrenia too. So anyway, she had that. So we had this long experience with her and her schizophrenia before we got taken over. But what happened was she took us on this crazy adventure because she developed this like fixation on this cocaine lord in Colombia when Like literally, she fell in love with this guy named Carlos later. She had seen him on TV and he was like the kingpin of all the cocaine lords. And she's like, that's my soulmate, basically. And she started becoming, literally, she started becoming like a pen pal of him. And then she decided we're all going to move to Colombia and we're going to become like living with him. And so she packed us up. We went on this road trip and we were going to go from where we were living at the time, Florida, to Colombia in the car. So we went on this like crazy, literally
Wow.
before foster care. Okay. So we went on this 6 months road trip. And then literally like all these things happened. And it was crazy because I mean, you would never believe it. I always think one day I'm going to actually make this movie. It's so bizarre. Like what happened, for example, we were driving through Colombia. I mean, no, we never made it to Colombia. We were driving through Mexico. Okay. And this was like in the 80s. Okay. Just picture Mexico, rural Mexico is very poor. Okay.
Right.
These people, they let us into their home because we're like living in our car. And basically there's 4 children and a mother. And we're all tiny. She was 4'11" and we were all like little. And so anyway, long story short, we would like be welcomed into these people's homes, these Mexican families. This one family, I'll never forget. They actually had like 12 children and they had a home the size of like one room, like your office, basically. You know what I mean? Like one room for 12 children, and they didn't even have plumbing. They had like a hole in the backyard and they used comic books. They didn't even have toilet paper. So it was just a thing. So anyway, we lived there. One of their children died while we were there in the house. And all these things happened. We were living in the car. So we finally left when that child died. We left. We were living in the car. One night, I remember, a man came to the window. We were sleeping in the car. He came to the window with a machete.
Ooh.
You know what a machete is?
Yeah.
It's a big knife. Okay. He came to the window with a machete. And it was the middle of the night. We're in Mexico. And he knocked on the window. And my mom was sleeping in the front seat, like in the driver's seat. She looks at him. I'll never forget though. This isn't the trauma part. This is a funny part, but I'm gonna get to the trauma part. This is a funny part because she looked at him and she had these ice blue eyes and black hair. And she was a tiny lady, but she was really strong. And she looked at him and she pulled out her machete. She had one in the car. She pulled it out. She looked at him with those eyes and he left. And I'll never forget that moment because it just gave me so much power to think like, wow, like we don't realize how much power we have, like just like that conviction that no one's going to mess with us, But anyway, so we went on this crazy adventure. We ended up in jail because I won't share the whole story. It's a long story, but 6 months we lived in the car and then we ended up in jail because our passports were expired. We were trying to go to Colombia. We got to Guatemala. Long story short, we're in the jail. So because we got to the jail, they alerted the International Border Patrol and stuff. And like somehow my dad alerted. And so we ended up getting taken back and we got taken back from Guatemala and we got flown back to the US. And that's when we got taken away and put into foster care. That was the first point of going to foster care. But I remember that night when they took us away from my mom and we were like in the dark in the night in this like where we lived. It was a very rural area of North Florida. And I just had this recurring trauma memory of them like tearing me out of her arms and I was screaming. And I relived that memory my whole life. It haunted me my whole life. And it was like, even this moment I get emotional because it's like just the memory of that. But it was like the screaming and the feeling of like getting torn out of your mother's arms and none of the other stuff like the machete. I mean, none of that was traumatizing to me. That was part of the fun adventure in a way. Somehow my mind had memorized those moments as like an adventure. And I chose a storyline of empowerment from those. Right. But the one of them ripping me out of her arms didn't. It became this deep wound of separation, abandonment, like feeling of lack of control. Like all these programs were born from that moment. And it was interesting because it took me my whole life to really understand the degree to which I had been at least 50% responsible for how much those programs went deep because I kept reliving it, right? So it wasn't until I was able to stop reliving it and then go back in and actually have this experience where I saw, I could choose to see it with a different storyline, or I could choose to breathe into my little child heart and say, you're going to be okay. You're safe. Like, it's all for the best, like when you're that age and you're having that experience, you don't think this is for the best. I mean, there's nothing good about it, but like when you grow up and you go through the whole journey of life, and then you can look back and you can say, wow, actually, I see it's because of that I became who I am, the strong person that I am, the leader that I am, even the compassionate empath of like wanting to serve and help people could be born from that level of pain. Whereas I have friends in my life that they had a very, lovely childhood, and then they're just not that driven to like make an impact. They just enjoy life, but it's not like this, I have to help the world kind of feeling of altruism that's born from that deep suffering.
Jody Lynn, I see a bunch of questions and comments on your face, so I'm going to shut up for a bit.
What a story! Oh my god,
that's like
there's so many. There's so many things that throughout that story, and that's just like I feel like a small morsel of the entirety of the picture. Like going to jail in Guatemala, like how was that not traumatizing? It's so interesting, and it just proves that we're constantly choosing what is true, and we can go back into those moments and we can change that meaning that we assign to it if we wish, like the meaning that you were talking about with your mom of being taken away and that deep trauma that developed there. It's inspiring though to see what you've gone through and how you were just like, yeah, it was an adventure. Yeah, I ended up in jail. Like how traumatic that would have been for someone else, and inspires other people to say, okay, it doesn't have to, like I can move through that trauma. I can get through it and get to a happy place.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like that idea of getting to the happy place, because I've worked with this, like what I would say is like trauma healing, but a part of it is like inner child healing, but it's also like emotional relating to it and like reframing. So there's so many layers to it. I worked with so many kinds of therapists and healers for my whole life, and I realized, there isn't really one direct approach. Everybody has had their unique experience, so it really comes down to like each individual and really working at the level that they're ready for. But yeah, like it's interesting because one of the things I'm really passionate about right now is working with the military, and it's interesting because they have like so much PTSD, and I think my whole life I had so much PTSD, and I like we can talk the story about when I got hit by I actually was in 5 near-death car accidents, and I want to share about that because
you say that again. You were in a 5-year what?
5 near-death car accidents, but I'll tell you.
Whoa.
Why? But I want to tell you why, because it's weird. Like a lot of people would be like, what is the deal? And even I was like, what is the deal? Like, after like a couple, you're like, why is this happening? Because I wasn't even the driver most of it. Sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't. So it wasn't like I'm just a bad driver. It was like, okay, do I just have bad luck? And then I tried to look at like from karma. I was like, did I like hurt someone in a past life in a car? I mean, what is the deal? Like I always tried to figure out the why, right? And so the first I had a few car accidents in high school, but then the first really big car accident was when I was riding my bicycle. And I was riding my bicycle. It was actually it was the worst year. I would say it's like I've had like 2 or 3 really bad years in my life, but that was like what I would say is the worst year of my life, because that year was when I had my thyroid removed, right? That was something you mentioned. So I had this thyroid disease for 4 years in high school. It was Graves' disease, which means hyperactive. So I had hyperactive thyroid. And so then 4 years. So finally, the last year they were like, we have to remove this or you're going to die. So I was like, oh, I don't want to die. So, okay, remove it. And so I had my thyroid removed. It was the same year that I actually had like so many things happen all at once. It was my senior in high school. I lost my virginity to rape. There was a boy that I knew. He was my neighbor. He was my friend's boyfriend. He was my friend, I thought. But anyway, it's a horrible, that was probably the most traumatizing thing that ever happened to me. Like, I think when the Me Too thing came out, I really wanted to speak out about it, but it was too painful to like make a big deal about it and bring it back up 20 years later. Cause I was like, man, I don't want to talk about it. It's like so painful, like to just bring it up. It's not easy, but that was another thing I had to sort of spend like several decades healing about. But basically, so that year I lost my virginity to rape. Then I had my thyroid removed. I went to school drunk and I got arrested at school for drinking. I got suspended from school, so I couldn't go to school. Then I moved out of my aunt's house and went to live with my friend because my aunt and uncle were like, "You are a mess." And I was like, "I can't live here." And so I left. Instead of trying to get help or therapy, I just was like, I left. And then that same year, besides all those things, I was like at the very end of this 1 year period, I was riding my bicycle and I got hit by a car. And the car was going 45 miles per hour. And it was just like crazy because I was trying to go across the highway and my bike chain, my bike link skipped and it wouldn't go. It like went off the track. And so I couldn't move forward. And this car did not slow down. It was so weird because it was actually kind of like turning of a red light. So that car was just going to try to like make it through the yellow, I guess.
Wow.
She smashed me so hard. I went flying. I was like dead. I believe I was dead for like 1 to 2 minutes because I remember seeing myself from above and it started to rain and they had to cut my clothes off of me to put the neck brace on to put me on the stretcher to the ER. And I just remember seeing myself from above and I was like, you know, just the witness of this experience and kind of like, wow. And then I went to the ER and they were like, you gotta, you know, get your spine looked at. And I was very stubborn at the time and I didn't believe in lawsuits because I felt like it was bad karma. So I was like, I should have sued this lady. I mean, I would be a millionaire. But anyway, the point was I just let it go. I was like, I'm going to let it go, you know, and I shouldn't have. I should have sued her. But anyway, long story short, it ended up causing me to have scoliosis. And so I ended up with scoliosis from that. And so this was like the worst year. I mean, if you could rack up more like horrible things, let me know. But basically, it was like one of those turning points. And then what happened was the doctors, they all said there's nothing you can do. And that if you have scoliosis, you have to just kind of like heal, you know, live with it. And you can do chiropractic and they can kind of like work with it. But there's no way to reverse scoliosis is what the doctors said. And so I didn't really believe that, but I didn't know any solutions at the time. So I was just kind of like managing the pain of this. And it was interesting. One day I was in college and I was in they had this big health fair and there was this chiropractor and he had one of those scales where it was like 2 different scales, 1 foot on each side. And I noticed I was putting 10 pounds more weight on one side than the other. So I was really out of balance and it was affecting a lot of my systems. I could feel it, you know, and I knew, but I didn't know how to fix it. And then it wasn't until a yoga teacher told me she healed her spine with yoga. And that was what gave me hope. And it was one of the many reasons that I ended up being guided to a yoga teacher training in my early 20s. But there was like a number of things that happened around that. Like this whole thing kind of imploded when I was 23 because what I realized is that I was taking all of this trauma and I was trying to like make up for this horrible feeling that I had inside of like not being enough somehow. And so I was like working myself to death. And I started, I had a job and a business and I was doing like 20 hours a day and I was burning myself out trying to like do this American dream idea. Like I had this boyfriend at the time. We bought this like house on a golf course in Boca Raton, Florida. And like, we thought we were living the American dream. And then what happened was I just got so depressed. I was so burned out from this work-related burnout that came from this deep feeling of like nothing I ever did was ever enough. So I needed to like do more to get ahead, to work harder. And I just burned myself completely out. I was so depressed for a year. And I remember during that time, it was like this, one day I woke up and, you know, the alarm went off. I had to go to work that day. And I just looked at the alarm and I was like, I did not want to get out of bed. And I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to live hardly. And I asked myself, like, what would I do if I didn't need money? Like, if money was no object, like, what could bring me happiness? What could bring me joy back to my heart? And I remember asking that question to God, basically to myself, to whatever. And then it led me to a deeper inquiry of what could bring me actual joy again. And this was the starting point of my happiness journey. And I ended up being guided to a yoga teacher training, which healed me like completely. And that's how I fell in love with yoga. I remember, like, I was so depressed when I started the training, but there was a point when it was a couple weeks into it, and every day we had to chant all these like Hindu chants and mantras, and we had to do meditation and yoga and breath work, and then we had to do selfless service. So we had to like clean the toilet at the studio for free every Saturday. And I remember sitting there on one of the Saturdays, just cleaning the toilets at the studio for free, singing these mantras like Jai Ganesha, and like I was in so much joy, and it was like the craziest thing, because my golf course palace with my boyfriend and all the money, none of it was bringing me any joy. And here I was cleaning a toilet for free on a Saturday morning, singing my heart out and full of joy. And I was like, wow, there's something to this medicine, this yoga. And so I fell in love with teaching yoga, sharing yoga, practicing yoga, like the path of spirituality just like became my medicine. And it was like such a beautiful transformation in my life early on. So that's a little snippet of the other part of the story.
I was half expecting another question coming from you, Jody Lynn.
Oh, why? I could get more.
I'm sure you could. I mean, when I meant I was going to step back, I mean, I'm really going to step back. I want to see what you're going to come out with. I mean, there's a lot of things to connect to here.
Oh, man. Wow. Okay. So we went through all of this trauma, and then, you started to, first spirituality, it sounds like, was the introduction to yoga and meditation, and like going within to ask yourself that question, what is going to make me happy? Then like what drastic changes, or what did you decide to do next in your life at that point?
That's a good question. So what happened was I left all that other stuff. Like I left the boyfriend, I left the place on the golf course, I left the job that I had, I left everything. And it was like all my safety and my comfort zone. I just gave it all up. I had very little money in the bank, but I was like, okay, I'm going to start this life. And I just had this deep feeling that it was all going to work out, And so what happened was I started a business, and I didn't actually start with yoga. Actually, in the beginning, I didn't really believe you could make a career out of yoga, because back then nobody was really making a career out of yoga. Like, this was 18 years ago, so like people were kind of teaching yoga at the YMCA for free, basically. It was like there was only a few teachers that were thriving. Like, that's it. And so nobody really saw it as a viable career. But so I was thinking, well, I could be a fitness trainer. So I got certified to be a fitness trainer at the same time. I started working as a fitness trainer at a country club. But it's interesting because a lot of the people started finding out that I was a yoga teacher too. And word of mouth gets out. And then everybody's like, can you teach us yoga? And like, just the universe was like, yoga. And I was like, no, like, you can't make a career out of it. In my mind, I was like trying to resist it. But I was like, okay, I just started like teaching yoga. And then it was just amazing because one thing always led to the next. So for example, back then I remember one of my friends, he was a professional boxer and a coach. And he said he gets his clients on Craigslist. So I was like, okay. So I started putting like ads on Craigslist. Nobody was putting ads on Craigslist back then. So I got like all these clients, and they were really good clients, like CEOs, attorneys, like really wealthy people. And then they always had friends. So they would like refer me to their friends. And then I ended up like this huge like client list of like really successful like CEOs, doctors, and everything like that really quickly. So within the first year, I think I made like $80,000 as a yoga teacher, because I was just like loving this like new life. I was like, I got freedom. I can do what I love. And I loved teaching, and people loved me teaching them. And I also learned like how to be a healer. So I would help them with their nutrition and their diets and their getting in shape, but also like with their emotional and their spiritual problems. So I became like this like spiritual coach for everybody, and they would just love coming over. So I actually got this like cute little place, and they would come to my place. And it was really smart because I was living in Boca Raton, Florida at the time. And I had this awareness that if you want them to come to you, you got to be in a nice area. So I got this like really cute place. It looked like Melrose Place, like that show. It was like really adorable. Everyone loved coming over, and I would make them tea, and we would do like yoga. And they just felt like going to my place, doing yoga with me, and having tea was like the best thing. And so they all wanted to do it like multiple times per week. And I just ended up like, and then I was teaching classes, and then I started to do workshops, and then I started teaching retreats. But what really catalyzed my career was one of my clients. He was a marketing specialist and a rabbi, and he actually helped me launch my YouTube channel in 2006. So I was one of the first people on YouTube. Now I feel so, like I feel like it's a weird thing that happened because I was one of the first people on YouTube. But so I launched the first ever online yoga challenge. 30-day yoga challenge went viral in 2008, and we reached millions of people, and it was amazing. But I got like so flooded with like people from all around the world, like telling me, oh, I need help. Can you help me? And I was not good at like leveraging myself or asking for help. So I got so overwhelmed with the amount of people asking me to heal them that I just, after a couple of years, I stopped doing YouTube that much because it was like 2010, right? And I had already been doing it like 4 years. And by then, and I didn't know how to monetize it. So I was just like, man, this is like taking my whole life, this YouTube. So I kind of stepped away. And it was funny because at that time is when everybody flooded in and started doing YouTube. And then all these people took my ideas, the 30-day yoga challenge, or like I used to do all these like juicing videos. I used to do these like vegan, like detox and everything. And then after that, I saw like a lot of people came in, they saw the videos that I like were going viral. They made a whole channel on each topic basically. And I see some of the people who came in at that point when I kind of had pulled back, and they like have millions and millions of subscribers on YouTube. But it's just like an interesting thing because I feel like I was always ahead of the curve, and I started a lot of trends in the spiritual community. But then by the time I was like already burned out, tired of doing it, like that's when everybody else, like the actual wave was just really starting at that point. But, I feel like there's good things about that, and then there's other things like that I learned from that. Like I could still do YouTube, but like I don't do it with enthusiasm because I already been on there like 18 years. So now I'm like, okay, like, do you go back to YouTube and make more yoga video? Like, what is like, like the formula? Because everybody, when you're just starting, it's all exciting and, oh, what topic should I do? And then once you did it like 15 years or more, you're just kind of like, okay, that's just another platform. Or, like I see all these platforms, they're just kind of like lots of different good things about them. But then it's like, I learned after so many years on social media that it's like, don't make your life based on any of these platforms because we don't own them. And I saw so much over these years, like, the algorithm change, or like the ownership change, or like the way that they're giving new reach changes. And like, I remember on Facebook, like I remember when they first launched Facebook Live videos, and we used to get such reach that on my Facebook page, like if I went live, it would go to like hundreds of thousands of people every time just because they're going live, because they wanted to push that feature. And then once the feature was like, in place, they pull back the reach. So you have to pay for the reach. And I just saw how these platforms keep doing that. And I was like, I'm sick of that. And I still do social media, of course, but it's like with a different awareness. It's like from that observer consciousness of like, okay, I see this as the value that it is, but I'm not going to build my life around it because I don't own it. And the way that they're constantly sort of like manipulating the algorithms to make more money and to pull back on your reach, just when you invested a decade into building a reach or building a follow, and then they change it so that you have to like pay or get some other approach. It's just exhausting. And so I started working on a whole different formula on how to like do my whole life and how to achieve my mission in life without it being so tied to the social media platforms, I guess you could say.
Tell us more.
What do you want to know?
What is the formula, Dasha? What is the formula?
Okay, so here's the thing. I think that there's two different things, right? You do want to have social media because it's it's important. Like, it's good. Like, it's like this way that, for example, instead of texting your sister, you text the world. It's like a nice thing. Like, if you use it in that way, then the whole world is your friend, and your whole world is like, hey, this is what I wore today, or this is what I had for lunch, or this is what I'm doing, or here's my interview with this beautiful person, or there's different usages of the platforms. All of them have a beauty to them. You always have to look at your intention, right? Like, what's your intention? If your intention is to reach the largest amount of people, or if your intention is to create a business around it, or if your intention is to create impact, or if your intention is an artist and you just want to put your art out there, or your intention is to, like I was saying a minute ago, like treat it like the world is your friend and like share about your life. There's so many different intentions. So I guess it always starts with that. But if there's a financial intention, I feel like that you have to be very strategic. Otherwise, you just waste so much time. And when I look at life, and I'm like, okay, we only have so much time in this body, in this life. How much of it are we wasting on things that if we look back when we're 90 or 100, and I'm going to be 150 it'll be 150, I'll be sitting back there reflecting on life. Will I be really grateful that I spend 90% of it on social media? Or will I have really wished that I would have invested it into a different type of energy, right? So it's like, not that there's any right or wrong, but I like to look at it from that lens so that I'm always clear. And when I know my intention, then I can use the platform instead of the platform using me. So that's kind of like the starting point of that conversation. So like, once you get those points clear, then you can sort of create a strategy for yourself, right? So if your strategy or your intention, like I said, has to do with making money or a business, or combining that with impact and reach, there's different like intentions, right? So if you don't have an impact intention, but you have a money intention, it's a totally different strategy than if you have an impact intention, no money intention. Because I know people like that. I know a lot of people, they just do social media just to impact the world. Then I have like other people in my life. I'll tell you, one of my ex-boyfriends, it's a very interesting story. One of my ex-boyfriends was really famous specifically on YouTube and Facebook, but he was also big on Instagram. He was like a fitness model from Germany. He was like half German, half Israeli. And he had like, I think 3.5 million fans on Facebook. And he had a very engaged audience. Like, he had like every post, he would get like 50,000 people liking it, like on Facebook, which is very hard to do right now. But anyway, he had like this hugely, and like he was so good at everything. Like, if you Googled six pack, his brand came up first on Google. He was just so good at these things. Okay, so just to give you the little backstory on that. So anyway, what happened was he became aware of his addiction of it. And then he became really aware of the relationship between his mental health and this addiction, or the dopamine hit of getting the like. And then he became really aware of the tie between all of that and the fact like of the machine that it is, right? And that you have to feed it certain type of content to get that level of likes. Like the content with him shirtless with his six pack, that was the content that worked really well. If he put something else, it didn't work as well, right? So he knew he had to feed it this certain type of content in order to keep it going. But he also realized out of 3.5 million fans, majority of them were gay men, and he wasn't gay. And he was like this, all of a sudden he realized he built this huge machine around the audience that he didn't even want to have. Like, let's say you're looking for like people to invite to your party. He didn't want these people at his party. Like, he didn't have anything against gay people, but these were not his ideal audience or customers or anything, right? So he's like, what do I even do with these 3.5 million gay men that are like, really interested in my six pack? And so it was an interesting thing as he got, went down this rabbit hole of looking at, okay, how do I get out of this machine? Because when you're so enwrapped into it, his whole financial model is wrapped around it, right? So he would make so much money. Like Gymshark would pay him like $40,000 for like wearing their clothes, you know, and like whatever. So he would do all these like deals and he was making really good money. He would say like, money just flies to me. That was like his affirmation, but it was true. Anyway, he had all this money flying at him. He was on TV, everything. So, but long story short, he wanted to get out of it because he realized he had built a machine that wasn't what he wanted his life to be, right? And it was the audience he didn't really want. It was the machine. It was the dopamine addiction energy that was like feeding it. It was like the fact that he had to stay in that level of consciousness in order to keep the machine going. And he just literally, after I took him to an ayahuasca ceremony, actually what happened was, it was like 2016. I took him to an ayahuasca ceremony and literally woke him up so much. Within 1 year, he walked away from his whole social media. Wow. And he had, luckily for him, because he's so smart, he had built a business that was paying him royalties. So he didn't need social media at that point, thank God, because he had built his life around social media where it was his source of income. But he had to reconstruct his entire approach to how do I earn money, and to do it in maybe not offline completely, but an off social media approach. And it really fascinated me because at that point, I was still in the mindset of like, oh, social media is the best way of making money. And actually, there's a lot of people that I personally know that do make really good money on social media. I even know people that, you know, their brands are doing $1 billion and, you know, a good amount of it's through there. But like, I know also I have some really close friends that are billionaires and they don't even have a personal social media presence. Like they don't even go on there. Nobody knows their name even. Like they're just like incognito, but they're a billionaire. And because their company was structured in a way that it's providing such value through different channels, right? That it's bringing this level of wealth and abundance and support for their bigger mission in life without the need of the machine. So I'm just giving you this like little glimpse into the big picture because there's so many different ways of going, right? There's the way of like build your whole life around it and like make that way work, like Jay Shetty style. But then there's like the way of like that I just described, my friends that are billionaires. And then there's like in between, there's like people that are billionaires that are on there, like Beyonce or something. But someone like Beyonce or Richard Branson, they're billionaires, but they don't spend time on social media. Guaranteed they're not scrolling on social media ever. Like that amount of even 1 second of that is such a waste of time when your time is worth $1 million a minute that you're kind of like, I guarantee they're not doing that. And they don't even post for themselves, right? So there's like a level to being present in that world without it being like even you doing it. So there's different ways of going about it. But like at the earlier level, like not like that you're not the billionaire, right? And this and that, but like it's just the strategizing and like asking those in questions, which are like, okay, what do I want my life to be? And does it require me to be on social media? And in the way that I'm interacting with social media, is that actually nourishing me? Is this going to be something that I look back on when I'm 100 and go like, wow, I'm so glad? Or am I going to be like, why did I waste all that time? And I've been really feeling into that. So the new structure to my company, I'm really excited about. We're doing a lot of different approach. One of the things we're going to be working with the Department of Defense. And this is a really exciting new direction for my life's work, you know, and it was like, it came to me because I worked with a lot of people from the military over my career. And I even like both of my grandfathers were in the war. They were both in the military in World War II during the Holocaust. And then also I had a lot of people in my life who were in the military, clients. Even when I first started the YouTube channel, there was this guy and he was like a military chaplain in, I think either Afghanistan or Iraq. And he used to email me and he was telling me him and all the guys at the base were doing my yoga videos and it was helping them. And I was like, oh my God. So there's a good example of where social media is very powerful and beneficial, right? So I'm serving my mission through that. But then he told me, you know, back then he was telling me how much it was helping them. But it was interesting. So now all these years later, 18 years later, and I'm thinking, you know, like I got really passionate about the military because one of my students, somebody from my community contacted me and he said he wanted to do our yoga teacher training that I have an online program, and it can become certified to be a yoga teacher with the Flow State Institute. And basically, he said that the military would pay for the training. They have an education stipend available, and that you just have to apply and get approved through the Department of Defense or through the Veterans Administration, and then you can get these the tuition completely paid for by the government. And I started looking at that as like such a beautiful alternative kind of approach, because you can serve this really like what we're doing. We're going to be serving the people that I feel really need it the most, you know, because one of the biggest problems that they face is like PTSD. And like I just described, I went through a whole life learning how to heal PTSD and working with people with that. And yoga is one of the #1 science-backed solutions for PTSD. Like when you incorporate also the breath work and the meditation and all the different aspects of yoga, and even backed by Harvard and Stanford, which I've worked with both of those universities. And it's interesting because I feel like my whole life was preparing me to work with this level of PTSD. And also I was thinking to myself, like, I want to find people that have experienced the level of trauma that I have so that I can relate to them. First of all, they can relate to me. That'd be interesting. You know, because I think like a lot of people always, my whole life, thought of me as like this really happy-go-lucky person because I have kind of a really bubbly personality. But then like I have that depth to me because all that trauma. So it's like always looking for ways to like be able to utilize the wisdom and the depth that I gained from this life. And so this is an exciting new direction that we're going with the military. We're actually going to be able to offer our training to the military spouses as well. And the Department of Defense will cover the tuition for the spouses of the military. So this is a big project that we're working on.
Cool.
Joni Lynn, having you ask the questions was definitely the right move. Because look at the answers you got off of your questions.
I know, right?
I mean, whoa. We love stories around here, but we just got story after story after. This is like Storyville that was going on right here. It was engaging. It was fun.
Good. Yeah.
And it's an hour. It's almost over. It's like, wait a minute, where'd the hour go? That's not fair. I want the hour back. Give me another hour of this. Oh my goodness! Tell people before we got to get a couple pieces from you. First of all, tell people what BFF Gift Club is.
Okay, so BFF Gift Club, it was born from my passion for helping children, actually, because like I told you my childhood story. So I've always had this deep passion for children. So I started an initiative called Children of the Future. It's like my nonprofit. It's called Bright Future Foundation. So Bright Future Foundation is BFF. Okay. But BFF also means best friend forever, right? So when we were kids, we used to have those necklaces and it was like a heart and you would give half to your best friend. And it's like best friend forever. And I thought, I was like, wow, Bright Future Foundation is BFF. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And so I started thinking of like, how can we do something special like for this? And so I developed this concept and we're getting ready to launch it, which I'm so excited about because my whole career, I was always trying to come up with little ways that people can get into meditation, you know, and like really get into these habits that can change your life. And especially with breath and meditation combined is like so healing, especially for PTSD. So anyway, we created this idea, which is like these bracelets. I'm calling them breathing bracelets. Right. And so, you know, like a mala bead, how it works is you got those big necklaces. The thing is, a lot of people wear malas, but they don't use them. So I was like, I want something that people actually will use. So this is a bracelet. It only has like 16 or 18 beads. And this one I love. I always wear it. It's like natural crystals and stones. And basically each bead represents a breath. So you can do like a 16 to 18 breath meditation once or twice a day or like every hour. I mean, it's only like a minute, but you know, when you stop and be intentional with deep breathing, you can change your whole life. So with these bracelets, we're launching this new initiative called BFF Gift Club. And it's amazing because it's going to come with a whole little kit and it comes with like this blue lotus oil. So blue lotus comes from the ancient Egyptian lotus flower, and it's euphoric aphrodisiac, and it's so wonderful. So it's a kind of oil that when you smell it, it can induce like a euphoria, and so it raises your vibration naturally, and it has a lot of other benefits too. So we mix the oil with moringa and jojoba and rose hip and a few different carriers that are like really nourishing. So you can put this on your skin, on your face, on your hair, and it's anointing oil. So it's this anointing oil with the blue lotus. You put it on your hair, you put it on your face, you breathe it in. You can put it everywhere because it's really nourishing. And then you do this breathing ritual. So the breathing ritual, we have a video that when people get the bracelet, they get a box and then it has a QR code. It takes them to the video. They can watch the video. It guides you how to use the bracelet. Specific breathing techniques that can help to regulate your nervous system, help you to calm your PTSD, help you to reprogram your consciousness into peace and joy and to feel good. And so these little bracelets, it's part of this thing called BFF Gift Club. And basically it comes with the bracelet, the Blue Lotus oil, as well as some health tonics and elixirs, and even these hydrosol. So this is another thing it's a Blue Lotus hydrosol for like bringing that same energy just into your auric field, cleansing your field, and elevating your vibration and making it into a ritual. So everything about the whole gift club is all about ritual and ceremony and sacred energy and bringing that consciousness into every breath and healing people one breath at a time. And my vision about BFF Gift Club is that you can come on the website, it's brightfuture.org, you can build a box and you can send this to your friend. So you pick out what color you want for the bracelet, you pick out the different items in the box, and then my team will put the box together and actually ship it to your friend. And you can put up to 12 different addresses and friends, and you can even put their birthday or the special date that you want it mailed on, and they'll mail it to your friend with a special custom gift card, whether it's birthday or whatever holiday. And so it's like this special idea about gifting, because I feel like we've gotten so much in the digital world and people are getting away from physical everything. So it's like, I want to bring the physical back. I want people to give each other gifts and cards again. When I was younger, I would always give all my friends gifts for every holiday, for every birthday, little card, handwritten. And nowadays, you hardly get a text from your friend. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so disconnected. And I want to bring people back to connection, back to their soul, and back to this like true experience of life, and a little bit away from the digital, which I went down the rabbit hole of digital for way too long. But I'm still in the digital, and I even love AI. But the idea that we need that physical, real connection, real gifts, and to remember your friend on their birthday. And so that's what it's all about. Brightfuture.org. People can go there, build a box, and send gifts to their friends and spread mindfulness and wellness.
Wow, we're going to include a link to that as well in the show notes to make it easy for people to find that. My next question is one I usually ask. I'm not even sure it's an appropriate question in your case, so you'll have to kind of reframe it as needed. But do you look for people to reach out to you? And if so, how do you want people to reach out to you?
That's a good question. Depends. Always like to get a lot of messages, but if people need my help, I'm always available to help people. So that's kind of the fine line. But so people can reach out to me. I mean, email is fine. Actually, they can go on the website, brightfuture.org. We have a contact us website. I have my own personal website at dashama.com. I have my yoga website is at flowstate.yoga. So I have a number of sites. If they go to flowstate.yoga, if they're interested in doing the yoga trainings, they can fill out an application, and then they can also schedule a time to have a conversation about their goals. And that's another way to connect. I also do coaching in different capacities, and also social media. So on every platform, I'm available. Dashama is my name, Dashama. And Instagram, if you send me a DM, I get those messages. If you tag me on social media, if you get the BFF Gift Club and you tag me, I'll repost it. I'm very active in that way, but I don't spend my whole life on there anymore. But but if you're interacting, I do interact back. And from this, I'll definitely share this conversation. I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with my audience. And yeah, all those different ways, and probably many more. People can reach out anytime.
Well, Jody Lynn, you know what comes next. I think that this is probably about as appropriate as it could possibly be, right? Considering the nature of this particular guest we have today. But Dashama, I noticed about a year and a quarter ago that we have a tendency in our society to overlook something that's really important, because, and you're a clear example of this. You have helped probably billions of people that you've never met, you've never seen through your YouTube videos and your courses and your all the different social media posts you put out and so forth. And we don't get recognized for that. So I'd like to kind of reverse that trend by saying, on behalf of those people that you've never met and that you've never seen, thank you for what you've been doing, because you're making a major difference in this life.
Thank you. You too. You know, it's an interesting thing. Like, that's one of the reasons that I was saying, like, how when you look back and you ask yourself, you know, was it worth it? And that's really the one thing that makes it worth it, is to know that your energy has made a difference in someone's life. And I'll tell you a story really quick. When one day I was writing a newsletter, and in my newsletter, people can subscribe to the newsletter on my website. In the newsletter, it was like one of those, you know, I was a cheerleader, you know, so I was like, hey, you know, your life has a purpose. And I'm always trying to like hype people up on their purpose and get them all excited about life. And it was so powerful because I got a response from the newsletter, and it was a woman who thanked me for the message. And she said, you have no idea, I was about to take my life today. And if I would have left behind my 6-year-old son. But I was so depressed and I felt so purposeless that I was about to take my life. And I just happened to get your email newsletter, and your energy shifted me in such a way I chose to live. And I just want to say thank you. And it's moments like that I live for. It's moments like that you're like, it's all worth it. Like, everything you do, you never know who you're reaching. You never know who you're pulling out of that darkness in that moment, you know. But you also have to take care of yourself and find the balance. But like, literally, that kind of experience, I've had many of those in my career, but that kind of feedback is what makes it all worthwhile. So thank you for your acknowledgement. I appreciate that.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to begin to thank you for all that you've been talking about and sharing with us here. So I'm just going to do my usual thing, which is to cast it off to Jody Lynn, because she usually comes with a great way of summarizing it. Now, you got a lot to pick from here, Jody Lynn. I mean, there's a ton to pick from here, right?
Oh,
so
man.
What are you going to focus on? What's the thing? What's the one?
The one thing? You didn't tell me I had to pick one thing.
Well, you can take 10 if you want.
I feel to sum things up, the level of consciousness that you are bringing to the world and that you are discovering and then showing people how to witness that within themselves is absolutely tremendous, and helping the world in a way that I think we need more of. If we're able to step back and see those stories and choose another path, we can have a happier life. And I love how in everything that you've been through, you are able to step back and see yourself or that story playing out as a witness, as you said, and understand your level of consciousness and raise it to a new level and a new level of happiness. And that consistently asking that question of, you know, when I'm 150 and I look back on my life, will I be happy with what I'm doing in this moment? And I think all of these things are beautiful reminders for everybody that's listening and the world today. So thank you.
Thank you, beautiful. So nice to meet you both. It's been such a joy to share.
You can see why I always call on. You can see why I call on Jody Lynn at the end. I mean, that was like perfect, right?
She's good.
She's really good. I don't think she really knows how good she is. She kind of does. You know, she's kind of learning that over time, but she's really good.
Pull it out.
That's why I grew up with my school is called Flow State Institute, and that's exactly where that comes from. It's like when you tap into this divine intelligence that gives you the words.
Exactly.
You know, I know, because I'm a teacher of this. Like, you didn't come up with that. That came, you know, that was from your divine nature, from your higher soul, and it was.
I take a breath, and then I witness to whatever comes out of my mouth. Literally,
I could see that, and I was like, so what you did was exemplify that you have that connection, and the portal is open, so you're able to receive this level of downloads, I like to call it, or, you know, however, divine guidance, and that's called flow state.
Yeah, beautiful.
How interesting. We actually talked about flow state in the last minute. We didn't talk about it the rest of the show. I mean, it was like the title of the show. We didn't even talk about it until the last minute.
The whole show was a flow, but, you know, all those stories that I shared were really leading up to this, because think about it. Like, how do you get to flow state? Now, some people just like fall into it, but I think that more than anything, it's literally a hyper focus ability for your soul to both, they call it where discipline meets surrender. So discipline is that like ability to actually be present and focus, and surrender is to not try to do anything. Like you're just like, she didn't have to think of what she's going to say. And that's that surrender element.
Beautiful
My goodness, we're going to get some comments on this one. They're going to love this one, I'm sure. As soon as they hear this one, we're going to get the emails. We're going to get the social media comments. So thank you so much, Dasha, for joining us on the show and sharing your amazing story, remarkable story. And we wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you so much. Same to you. Many blessings.
Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.